The movie begins with three women taking a stroll, with one of them, Saya Suzuki, expressing interest in getting her fortune read. But Saya is disappointed with the reading's outcome. Her friends then reassure her that she'll meet her soulmate. Suddenly, Matsuzawa screams upon seeing an advertisement featuring the famous actor Haruki on a big screen, because she is a huge fan of Haruki. Saya notices something odd about Haruki's behavior. Her memory then flashes back to when she and Haruki were teenagers searching for a four-leaf clover as a symbol of luck. On the big screen, Haruki says he'll meet someone, leading Saya to believe it's her he's referring to. That morning, Saya is late for her job at a luxury hotel, where she works in the event planning department. Saya is a beautiful girl known for her carefree nature and innocence. Upon her late arrival, Saya receives a scolding from her boss, Susumu Tsuge, who often reprimands her for her carelessness. Shortly after, Saya once again makes a mistake. While welcoming a foreign guest who's hungry, she messes up the guest's food order. Saya then excuses herself to correct the mistake in crossing paths with Tsuge, who has been keeping an eye on her. At that moment, Tsuge scolds her again and Saya accepts the scolding while apologizes. It can be seen that Tsuge is the type of man who is disciplined, hardworking, indifferent, and very cold. After that, Saya tries to find the foreign guest's order in closed food stores. Despite overcoming the problem, she still anticipates further scolding from Tsuge, after he instructs her to wait in the hall. When Tsuge appears, Saya immediately advises him not to be excessively angry. However, Tsuge criticizes her again for her poor memory. Hearing this, Saya protests slightly, but Tsuge unexpectedly asks her out on a date. Hearing this confuses and surprises Saya. While in his composed manner, Tsuge explains that he doesn't want to waste time with pointless dating and prefers to get married right away, as he believes that Saya is suitable to be his partner because he considers her the least irresponsible. It turns out Tsuge had a plan to advance his career abroad, and having a partner would facilitate achieving his dreams. The following day, Saya, who has just finished her work, was seen watching a movie starring Haruki on her phone, while reminiscing about her first love. Suddenly, a colleague informs her about an artist who left their belongings and asks for Saya's help in returning them. Shortly after, Saya arrives at the artist's room and rings the bell. After waiting, the door finally opens, revealing a beautiful woman with long hair who seems annoyed by Saya's presence, after she's suggesting Saya could have left her belongings with her manager instead. Hearing this, Saya stays silent, but she is taken aback after accidentally seeing Haruki, her first love, who just finished showering inside. Heartbroken, Saya then returns home from work and encounters Tsuge. At that moment, she calls out to Tsuge and immediately suggests they try dating for just one night. But Saya is confused when Tsuge remains silent, unresponsive to her proposal. Feeling embarrassed, Saya quickly excuses herself, but she's surprised when Tsuge accepts her invitation. After that, they drink together, where Saya opens up to Tsuge about her first love story from junior high school involving Haruki. Not long after, Mr. Matsushita, one of the hotel executives, appears to meet Saya and informs her about the Valentine's Day guest, which turns out to be Haruki and his partner. Mr. Matsushita then tasks Saya with handling the event, which turns out to be a success. As Saya leaves, intending to write a congratulatory note to Haruki, he suddenly appears and snatches the note. Saya is taken aback when Haruki suggests speaking directly instead of exchanging notes. She tries to retrieve her note, but Haruki reads it and pockets it. Saya is surprised that Haruki still remembers her and asks if he's dating the artist. Haruki clarifies that they're not dating because they're just putting on a show. Haruki then asks if Saya has a boyfriend, where she points to Tsuge. While Saya trying to call him, Tsuge seems not to hear and enters the elevator. At that moment, Haruki teases Saya for being ignored by her own boyfriend. One evening during a staff outing and dinner, Saya notices Tsuge sitting alone. She then approaches him, pours a drink, and teasingly remarks about him being a loner. Saya gets irritated when Tsuge stays silent, but then he surprises her by inviting her to leave. Nervous, Saya follows Tsuge to his room, where he asks what she wants to say. Saya then questions his motives for inviting her out, which suspecting he might be playing a prank. Tsuge sarcastically responds, reminding her that he had already explained his intentions. The next morning, Kazuyo reveals that their boss, while drunk the previous night, mentioned demoting Saya due to her carelessness, but Tsuge intervened to prevent it. Knowing this, Saya starts to develop feelings for Tsuge, though she remains unsure about their relationship. Later, while on a duckboat ride alone, Saya observes Tsuge assisting another hotel employee retrieve her hat. The employee tries to kiss Tsuge, prompting Saya to accidentally fall into the water and start drowning. Knowing this, Tsuge immediately rescues her. Upon waking up, Saya finds Tsuge sitting beside her and scolding her for always getting into trouble. She listens quietly as Tsuge then stands, bows to her, and kisses her, while expressing his feelings. Though pleased, Saya remains silent. The next day, she believes Tsuge's demeanor has changed, but upon returning to work, Tsuge resumes his indifferent and aloof attitude toward her. The following morning, Saya sees Tsuge accidentally trying to act indifferent, but Tsuge calls her over. He then asks her to review a report and leaves without saying more. As Saya opens the report, she's surprised to find a note from Tsuge inviting her on a date at 7 p.m., which makes her happy. That evening, Saya arrives at the designated place, smiling and waving to Tsuge. After that, they walk hand in hand under cherry blossom petals, enjoying the night, and end up spending it at Tsuge's apartment. The next day, Tsuge helps dry Saya's hair, confirming they're indeed dating when she asks. After that, Saya suggests going to an amusement park, feeling a bit nervous when Tsuge initially stays silent, but thrilled when he agrees. At the park, despite Tsuge's indifferent expression, they have fun together. The following day, Tsuge was seen discussing with his boss, hotel owner Yoshimichi. At that moment, Yoshimichi asks Tsuge to manage their upcoming hotel in France, which surprising Tsuge, who has no choice but to comply. Because he knows Yoshimichi will demote anyone who disobeys, as seen with Mr. Matsushita, now working as a chauffeur. The following day, Saya is seen chatting with Matsuzawa and Kazuyo, where she feels troubled about how to ask Tsuge about his birthday. At that moment, Matsuzawa suggests being direct, but Saya hesitates, finding it too forceful. After that, Kazuyo proposes a double date idea, suggesting she'll subtly mention it to Tsuge. Hearing this, Saya agrees to the plan. Meanwhile, Tsuge and Yoshimichi went to meet a client at a restaurant, where they encounter Sayori, Yoshimichi's younger sister, who's on a blind date. At that moment, Sayori immediately interested when introduced to Tsuge. Eventually, Sayori becomes angry when Tsuge teases her, but she is impressed when he helps her after she accidentally bumps into a waiter. Tsuge then accompanies Sayori to the hospital and ensures she gets home safely in a taxi. The next morning in the women's changing room, one of the hotel employees shares gossip about seeing Tsuge walking closely with Sayori and taking a taxi together. While looking at the menu, Saya notices Tsuge walking away because he received a phone call. Seeing that, Saya feels curious but hesitant to ask. It turns out, Tsuge gets a call from Sayori, where she's asking him to meet her urgently. Although Tsuge is hesitant, but Sayori seems interested in his cold and distant nature. Meanwhile, Saya is seen checks her agenda book and sees her double date schedule with Kazuyo. But then she receives a message from Haruki, asking about her well-being and reminding her that tomorrow is her birthday. Shortly after, Saya meets Haruki for a meal at their usual cafe. They then reminisce their time a bit, and Haruki gives her a stuffed toy as a birthday gift. Several days later, during the double date, Kazuyo approached Tsuge with a question about his birthday. At that moment, Saya overheard and learned that Tsuge's birthday had passed 2 weeks ago. Quickly, she went to find a gift for him. Outside the gift shop, Saya was thrilled to see Tsuge looking for her, but she felt disappointed when he scolded her for leaving without explaining anything. At that moment, Saya asked if Tsuge was dating Sayori, but Tsuge denied it, explaining it was Yoshimichi's command. Conflicted, Saya then immediately left, and her gift fell. The next evening, Saya waited for Tsuge in front of his apartment, where she was delighted to see him wearing the scarf she bought. Tsuge then gave her a ring as a birthday present, shocking Saya because he knew her birthday. After that, Tsuge frowned and wondered why he had to invite Saya on the double date when he wanted to give her the ring directly. Hearing this, Saya smiled and thanked him, but Tsuge stayed silent as usual. After that, they spent the night at Tsuge's apartment. Not long after, Tsuge eventually went to Paris, where Saya worked diligently and messaged Tsuge often, but he never replied, only reading them. During a video call, Saya asked if Tsuge would come back for Kazuyo's wedding, but before he could answer, Sayori briefly appeared and Tsuge hastily ended the call. At that moment, Saya was disappointed and curious, but she couldn't do anything. After that, she complained to Haruki when they met, finding long-distance relationships difficult because she didn't know what Tsuge was doing there, which made her uncomfortable. Hearing this, Haruki suggested to Saya that she should trust Tsuge, believing that he might be hiding something to prevent her from worrying. Haruki also reassured her that even if Tsuge didn't express it, he still surely thought about her. Saya felt relieved after talking to Haruki, unaware that they were being photographed by paparazzi. Not long after, Tsuge finally returned to Japan, where Yoshimichi is angry and throwing a magazine containing an article about Saya and Haruki. At that moment, Tsuge tries to defend Saya, suggesting there must be a misunderstanding. But Yoshimichi immediately leaves, followed by Sayori. Tsuge then interrupts, mentioning that one of his subordinates is getting married today. But Yoshimichi sarcastically asks if the wedding is more important than him and leaves without waiting for Tsuge's answer. On the other hand, Kazuyo's wedding ceremony was lively, but Saya felt troubled because Tsuge hadn't shown up. Feeling dejected, she went home. Haruki then approached her and Saya, panicked, took him to a quiet spot. At that moment, Haruki wanted to apologize for the article and explain to Tsuge everything. After that, they went to his apartment. Meanwhile, Mr. Matsushita hurriedly called a taxi, where Yoshimichi appeared, followed by Tsuge, who was assisting Sayori, drunk and unsteady. After a meeting, they were unsure of where Sayori lived in her intoxicated state. At that moment, Tsuge decided to take her to his apartment. Shortly after, Saya and Haruki arrived at Tsuge's apartment just as a taxi pulled up, and Tsuge emerged with Sayori. Misunderstandings arose between them, and Haruki confronted Tsuge after he unable to control his anger. He then immediately punched him until Tsuge fell. Seeing that, Saya tried to help Tsuge, while Sayori left. At that moment, Haruki hoped Saya would leave with him, but she insisted on talking alone with Tsuge. In Tsuge's apartment, Saya asked why he was with Sayori. But instead of answering, Tsuge turned the question back on Saya, asking why she was with Haruki, and told Saya not to see Haruki again. Saya refused because Haruki was her friend. Hearing this, Tsuge seemed to realize what was going on and decided it was best for them to end everything. The following day at the hotel, Mr. Matsushita appeared with a happy smile because he was reinstated as the boss, but Saya's desk was empty, where the attendance list showed that Saya was on leave. That evening, Saya came back from the cafe and found Haruki waiting for her outside her house. Although Saya didn't want to meet him and asked him to leave, Haruki stayed there. After that, Saya hurriedly grabbed an umbrella to shield Haruki from the rain, then invited him inside and offered him a warm drink. That night, both of them couldn't sleep as they were lost in their thoughts. The next day, Saya accompanied Haruki to the station, where Haruki paused for a moment and confessed that he couldn't bear his love for Saya anymore. While holding Saya's hand, they boarded the moving train together. Shortly after, they arrived at a church where they often visited as teenagers. There, Haruki expressed his feelings to Saya. He even wanted to kiss her, but Saya refused. After that, Haruki took Saya for a walk in the vast green field. Suddenly, Haruki approached Saya with excitement, presenting her with the four-leaf clover he had found. At that moment, he called out Saya's name cheerfully and expressed his affection. Haruki then encouraged Saya to do the same, but she stepped forward and vented her frustrations about Tsuge. Returning the four-leaf clover, she made it clear that she no longer had feelings for Haruki. Saya then expressed confidence in finding her own happiness and thanked Haruki for his help. On the other hand, feeling troubled, Tsuge asks Sayori to marry him, seeing it as a means to advance his career. At that moment, Sayori agrees, but with condition that Tsuge spends the night with her. Hearing that, Tsuge refuses, but Sayori secretly slips sleeping pills into his drink. The next morning, Tsuge wakes up to find Sayori acting affectionately towards him, insinuating that they had spent the night together. Tsuge also annoyed when Sayori threatens to disclose this to Saya. Shortly after, Yoshimichi arrives to take Sayori away, leaving Tsuge behind, visibly upset and regretful for being swayed by Sayori's charms. Not long after, the news of Tsuge and Sayori's engagement quickly spreads throughout the hotel, reaching Saya. After that, Sayori's father formally entrusts his daughter to Tsuge with a bow, further unsettling him. Shortly after, Mr. Matsushita enters the office and announces that everyone is to gather at the royal garden to celebrate Tsuge and Sayori's engagement. Despite the short notice, Mr. Matsushita instructs everyone to prepare for the party, where Saya, filled with sorrow, reluctantly participates in the preparations, Lost in her thoughts, she accidentally collides with a staff member carrying food equipment. As she picks up the scattered flowers, she unexpectedly discovers a 4-leaf clover, bringing her to tears. On the other hand, Tsuge was seen scanning the area from the balcony, and the applause abruptly fades as he calls out Saya's name. At that moment, he confesses that he doesn't care anymore and apologizes for doubting Saya's friendship with Haruki. Tsuge admits feeling jealous of those with beautiful pasts and reveals his decision to end his engagement with Sayori. He fears consequences like being sent to a dismal place or even losing his job. Rushing down the stairs, Tsuge approaches Saya, observed by their co-workers. At that moment, he confesses his love and asks Saya to marry him. Tearfully, Saya embraces Tsuge and he hugs her back. The crowd cheers happily, welcoming the new couple. Witnessing this, Sayori recalls Tsuge's earlier plea to cancel the engagement event, and reluctantly, she deletes all the photos of Tsuge from her phone before leaving. Yoshimichi then calls Tsuge and praising him as an outstanding man. He admits he won't dismiss Tsuge from the hotel because of his commendable work. At the same time, Saya receives congratulations from her friends. Suddenly, a drunken Mr. Matsushita hugs Saya from behind, startling her and causing the 4-leaf clover she's been holding to slip away. Saya tries to retrieve the clover, searching under the table. She then smiles upon finding it and reaches for it, but Tsuge also reaches for it. Seeing this, Saya smiles and gives the clover to Tsuge and leans in to kiss Saya. Moral lesson from the story: if you find a 4-leaf clover among the scattered flowers, hold onto it tighter than a squirrel with its nuts, because happiness might just be hiding under your table.